So maybe some of you will find this surprising, maybe some of you won't, maybe some of you are going to really identify with this, but if you didn't already know, I am kind of an overcommitter. I absolutely will make a plan that I cannot feasibly achieve, and I do this almost every single year. And if you identify with that, if you are also a big overcommitter, then you're going to want to stay for this video. If you're new here, hi, my name is Rachel, and we are currently in the middle of my free garden planning course for beginners. And especially if this is your first video, I highly recommend that you go to the link below and catch up on everything that we've been doing up until this point. As a quick reminder, I will be here on the first of every single month with a new journaling prompt for you, and I highly recommend that you complete these, especially if it's your first year gardening, but even if it's not, because thinking through these things is something that we don't often do as gardeners, and I think it's actually really, really helpful. So today's prompt is, how am I complicating things, and how can this be easier? And this is helpful to think about now, but it's also helpful to think about pretty often in the future, because if you're anything like me, you will inevitably get in over your head again. I think it is particularly timely right now because it is garden planning season and we are all dreaming really big. And like I've said before, dreaming really big is really awesome, but noticing and respecting your limitations is also really important. And this is a good chance to really look over your entire plan and think about, how is you in May, in June, in July going to feel about what you've signed yourself up for? For me, my answer to this question is, I actually last minute, like maybe a week or two ago, decided that I was going to order some rare perennials all the way from Canada. And I went through this whole big process of getting a permit to import them and everything. And all of these perennials are going to need special care, especially to get started. And that's a lot of work. That's a lot to sign up for. And that is a big way that I am making my garden more complicated this year. By the way, if you want to actually hear about all of those rare perennials, I will be doing an unboxing of those over on my Patreon whenever they come in. With the way they have to go through customs, I'm not exactly sure when that'll be, but it'll probably be before the end of this month. So even before I ordered some rare perennials last minute, I was already complicating things with my garden just a little bit more this year. I am making a big squash patch for the first time, and I'm planting some new varieties to see if I can finally get something to actually grow despite all of the pests. And I am planting a pawpaw tree from seed this year, which is pretty complicated to get the germination right. So I have signed up for a lot, and these are some of the ways that I am complicating things for myself this year. So the next question I need to ask myself is, how can I make this easier? Right now, the answer to that question feels like plan. Like if I can think right now during the time where I'm not actually having to do anything, I just have the time to sit and think about it. I'm not overwhelmed yet by having to do stuff in the garden. If I can think through it and figure out when and what I have to do, then put that exactly in my calendar, like give myself marching orders. Then when the time comes, all I have to do is look at my calendar and be like, oh, this is what I'm doing today. And then I do it. And theoretically, that makes things a whole heck of a lot easier. In the past, the ways that I've made it more complicated for myself are, I would go out to a plant sale and I would buy a bunch of plants that I did not originally plan on having in my garden that year, because that's what we do. But then what happens is I only have a span of like maybe 2 or 3 days up to a week to figure out, what does this plant need to grow? Where can I put it in my garden? And then I have to actually put it in my garden, and I have to do all of that. It's usually a fairly short turnaround because the timing of when these plants become available for purchase is usually about the time that they need to be planted anyway. So that definitely is a little overwhelming and a little complicated, especially doing all of that mental work of, what does this plant need? And then having to execute on it immediately. So I know this whole course has been all about planning, but part of the reason that I took the time to create this planner and this course is because planning is so important, and it has really changed my gardening in so many ways being this detailed with it, it really, really, really does help. And that's why I'm here and teaching it all to you guys, right? So a lot of times planning can be a way that you can make things less complicated for yourself. And especially once you see what you're planning to do, then it's easier to make modifications so that it's just a little bit less complicated. One of the things that I did last year to make things a little bit easier for myself that I actually really enjoyed is I really pared down the number of varieties for each of the annuals that I was growing. So tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, things like that. I had fewer varieties than I had in the past, and that made things so much easier. One, fewer labels to keep track of. You guys know me, I am really terrible at actually labeling the stuff in my garden physically. And so I'll get halfway through the year and the label is gone or faded or whatever, if I do put a label at all. And then I'm like, I guess I'll have to like wait until this fruits to see which variety it is. And that is easier to deal with when you have 2 or 3 varieties as opposed to 10. Not to mention when a couple of plants died, like they always do, no matter how good you are, it was way less of a bummer because I had plenty of other plants of that same variety, and it wasn't like my only plant of that variety just didn't make it, you know? So today your homework is to think about this prompt and go ahead and fill it out in your planner. Remember, it is how am I complicating things and how can I make this easier for myself? And then I would love to hear your responses in the comments below. I think it'll be helpful for me, it'll be helpful for other gardeners to hear about the sorts of problems you're facing and also how you're going about solving those problems for yourself. Remember to catch up with me in March for our March prompt, and please subscribe if you haven't already so that you don't miss that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.